Have you ever wondered why some world leaders make decisions that seem to defy all logic and morality? What if you were told that there's more than political strategy behind these choices, something ancient, hidden, and deeply spiritual? In our upcoming video, we dive into uncharted and dark territories, revealing how demonic forces have manipulated rulers from biblical times to today. Discover the astonishing connections between the Old Testament, the Book of Revelation, and modern political maneuvers. Understand the influence of spiritual Babylon on decisions that shape our world, and how the Antichrist is already weaving his web behind the scenes of global power. Join us on this revealing journey to unmask the true powers that control the destinies of nations. Are you ready to face the truth that most fear to acknowledge? Throughout history, many believe that important decisions by rulers were not merely the product of their own minds, but influenced by forces beyond our common understanding. For example, in the Bible, figures like King Herod and the Pharaoh of Egypt are portrayed as leaders who, at crucial moments, seem to have their decisions manipulated by demonic influences. The name Herod is of Greek origin, derived from Herodotos, which means hero of the song, or glory of the hero. This name was borne by many leaders of the Herodian dynasty, known for their political cunning and cruelty, but the most notorious is Herod the Great. Herod the Great was born into an Idumean family, a ethnicity descending from Esau, brother of Jacob, Israel. His father, Antipater, was a high official under Roman rule, and helped to consolidate Herod's position as ruler in Judea. This explains the Roman and Hellenistic influence in his governance. Herod is best known for his role in the events of the birth of Jesus, specifically the massacre of the innocents in Bethlehem, described in Matthew 2:16-18. This act was an attempt to eliminate any threat to his power by the future King of the Jews, a prophecy he feared Jesus would fulfill. Herod is an example of a leader who, despite his power and political glory, is remembered for his brutality and fear of losing control, characteristics that can be interpreted as manifestations of evil influences according to the Christian view. While Herod reacted with fear to the prophecy of Jesus' birth, another ancient ruler, the Pharaoh of the Exodus, faced a similar challenge to his power, but in a way that is rarely discussed. Setting aside well-known narratives, we will explore how Pharaoh's choices resonated through his administration and society, revealing hidden aspects of his governance that shaped the fate of a nation. The title Pharaoh comes from the Egyptian term Peri-Ai, meaning great house, and refers to the royal palace. The Pharaoh of the Exodus is not specifically named in the Bible, which is common in biblical scripture, focusing more on the title and role than the person. Many say that this all likely occurred during the reign of Pharaoh Ramses II. The Pharaoh of the Exodus belonged to the lineage of pharaohs of the New Kingdom of Egypt, which included great builders and conquerors. This was a time of great expansion and centralization of power, which was reflected in the divinization of the pharaoh, considered by some as a living god and intercessor between the gods and the people. During the Exodus, this pharaoh is portrayed as the oppressor of the Israelites, denying them freedom despite the various miracles and plagues sent by God through Moses. The narrative in Exodus 7-11 shows his stubbornness and the hardening of his heart as symbols of human defiance of divine will. The Judeo-Christian tradition often interprets his obstinacy as a demonstration of the conflict between God's sovereignty and human power corrupted by evil influences. Imagine standing on the turbulent waters of the Nile, witnessing not just a clash of wills but an epic battle between light and darkness. The duel between Moses and Pharaoh unfolds before your eyes, not as mere pages of an ancient book, but as a mirror reflecting your own inner struggles. This saga, intertwined with the fate of nations, resonates with the eternal battle between divine sovereignty and the stubborn rebellion of the human heart. As Moses challenges Pharaoh, each request to release his people becomes an echo in your soul, calling you to consider the chains that still bind your own spirit. How often do we cling to illusory power, resisting truths that would set us free? How many divine signs do we ignore, choosing paths that lead only to more suffering and disillusionment? This narrative speaks not just of physical slavery, but of each of our journeys toward true freedom, a freedom that flourishes in the heart and extends through our lives. As we reflect for a moment, we see that the choices of leaders we read about in the Bible are not mere matters of governance, but manifestations of a spiritual drama that transcends time and space. At the heart of these stories are nefarious agreements, pacts that not only shape the fate of nations but echo a battle between the divine and the profane. In the Old Testament, consider King Solomon, whose wisdom was surpassed only by his later fall into idolatry. Initially blessed with divine wisdom, Solomon eventually forged political and spiritual alliances through marriages with foreign princesses, introducing the worship of foreign gods into Israel. 1 Kings 11:4-6 reports, "For when Solomon was old, his wives turned his heart to follow other gods, and his heart was not wholly devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of David his father had been. Solomon followed Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. Solomon did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and did not follow the Lord fully, as David his father had done." This is an example of how an initially strategic agreement unfolded into profound spiritual consequences, diluting the purity of worship of the God of Israel and leading the kingdom to eventual division and exile. Brethren, if we move forward to the New Testament, we see that the figure of the Antichrist in Revelation symbolizes the apex of these nefarious spiritual agreements. He is described as a charismatic and powerful leader who establishes a global covenant that seems promising, but is saturated with deception and evil. This leader not only negotiates with political powers, but, more sinisterly, with evil spiritual forces, bringing great tribulation to the world. This pact is an expanded reflection of the many agreements made throughout biblical history, where temporal power is exchanged for an alliance with evil. Now think about your own life. Where do you see the reflection of these agreements? Do we sometimes compromise our deepest values for convenience or temporary gain? This reflection is not just a theological exercise, but a call to live with integrity in a world that often trades eternity for the immediate. The book of Revelation is often regarded as a mysterious text, full of symbols and visions. But it also provides profound perspectives on our own time, especially regarding leadership and spiritual challenges. The apocalypse is not only a prophecy of the future, it is a source of wisdom about how to deal with adversity and the power dynamics that shape the world. Leaders are often presented in terms of good and evil. For example, there is the Lamb, referring to Jesus and his just leadership, and the beast symbolizing corrupt and tyrannical forms of rule. For us today, this emphasizes the need for leaders who seek power in the service of justice, mercy, and truth. The apocalypse also speaks of the mark of the beast, a sacrificial sign of fealty to the forces of evil. In the modern world, this might be understood as a warning to be alert to where we give our loyalty and how the decisions of leadership can ask us to make commitments that violate our core moral values. The apocalypse encourages us to hope and to remain vigilant. In the context of leadership, this means to be aware and critical of the leaders and movements we follow. Hope lies in the ultimate victory of the good, a key theme of the book, which maintains that, contrary to appearances, good will prevail. Have you ever wondered how ancient stories still echo so strongly in the world today? Let's dive into the vibrant pages of the book of Revelation, where symbols like Babylon and the Antichrist reveal an epic confrontation between good and evil that influences even the decisions of the world's great leaders. Imagine Babylon, described as a great whore that seduces entire nations, leading them down dangerous paths of corruption and false promises. Revelation 17:1-5. But what does this really mean? This figure is a powerful reflection of historic Babylon, that splendid and feared city that imprisoned God's people and led them into exile. Today we might think of Babylon as any modern system that seductive and deceptive, pulls us away from the paths of goodness, promising power and pleasure in exchange for our essence and values. Interesting, isn't it? Now let's talk about the Antichrist, this character who seems straight out of a thriller, but who carries a much deeper and more terrifying meaning. He emerges in Revelation as the peak of evil forces, a charismatic leader who speaks great blasphemies and directly challenges divine authority. Revelation 13:5-7. But think about it. How do today's leadership figures reflect the same temptation to absolute power, deceiving and dominating the masses with empty promises? The Antichrist shows us what happens when power falls into the wrong hands. According to Revelation, the Antichrist possesses qualities that deceive many at first glance. He is charismatic and has a rhetorical ability that allows him to utter great things and blasphemies, thus promoting an agenda against God. Revelation 13:5. Moreover, he wields immense power, capable of leading nations and convincing the masses with promises of peace and prosperity, while his true intentions are nefarious. This leader is described as having a mortal wound healed, Revelation 13:3, suggesting a capacity to overcome adversities in a way that captivates even more his followers. He is someone who, at first glance, might even seem like a savior, but whose actions bring destruction and desolation. But how does this concept apply to our current context? The spirit of the Antichrist can be seen today in how certain leaders manipulate the truth and use their power. This spirit manifests through leaderships that, although they may appear beneficial, promote division, conflicts, and alienate people from fundamental ethical and moral values. In global politics, the spirit of the Antichrist is noticeable in regimes that suppress freedom, in policies that promote hate and intolerance, and in the erosion of principles of justice and equity. These actions may not be attributed to a single person, but are representative of a system or a culture that exalts power and domination at any cost. Historically, Babylon was one of the most important cities of ancient Mesopotamia, famous for its magnificent Ishtar Gate and the Hanging Gardens, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. But in the scriptures, its significance goes far beyond its physical or political stature. Babylon is often cited as the epitaph of human corruption, idolatry, and arrogance that defies the divine order. In the book of Revelation, Babylon is portrayed as a city that intoxicates nations with the wine of its immorality. This symbolism is not just a condemnation of the ancient city, but a powerful metaphor for entities or systems that seduce and divert people from paths of righteousness. Over time, the figure of Babylon has evolved to represent any power that manipulates and controls through corruption and seduction. In the biblical narrative, this is seen not only in the context of pagan kings, but also in the leaders of Israel, who fell into idolatrous and corrupt practices. Babylon, thus, symbolizes the constant temptation of secular power and political influence that oppose divine commands. Spiritually, Babylon challenges us to reflect on how we resist or yield to forces of corruption in our own lives and societies. It questions us. How might today's leaders be reproducing the same type of manipulation and control, promoting self-interest at the expense of the common good? In a world where power often corrupts, the story of Babylon serves as a reminder of the need for vigilance and integrity. In the book of Revelation, Babylon is portrayed as the pinnacle of human corruption, a center of lust, greed, and idolatry. Its final destruction is marked by intense symbolism. Fallen, fallen is the great Babylon. Revelation 18:2. This cry is not just an announcement of physical ruin, but symbolizes the inevitable collapse of systems built on injustice and oppression. The relevance of this event for contemporary Christians is profound. In a world where success is often measured by material accumulation and political power, the story of Babylon serves as a somber reminder of the spiritual consequences of unbridled greed and the idolatry of power. It invites us to reflect on what we truly value and challenges us to seek a kingdom not of this world. The influence of Babylon in the apocalyptic setting also extends to its ability to shape religious and political practices. In Revelation, it is associated with the seduction of the masses and the manipulation of the powerful of the earth. Revelation 18:3. This representation resonates vividly today, where we see leaders and institutions often more committed to political pragmatism or economic growth than to ethical and moral principles. For Christians, then, the challenge is to discern how faith can positively influence governance, promoting justice, peace, and the common good, in contrast to the corrupt and self-destructive practices exemplified by Babylon. This involves a faith that is not just private or contemplative, but actively engaged in the social and political issues of the world. So how can we apply Christian teachings to these contemporary challenges? The answer lies in the way we choose to live our lives on a daily basis. Christians are called to be salt and light, influencing the culture around them through actions that reflect the values of the gospel. This means promoting an ethic of service rather than domination, of generosity rather than greed, and of community rather than individualism. Faced with the challenges of the modern world, the story of Babylon in Revelation is not just a warning about divine judgment, but also an inspiration to live in a way that honors eternal values. It is a call for each of us, regardless of our position or power, to contribute to a world that more closely mirrors the kingdom of justice, love, and peace that God desires for all of us. In an era where success is often measured by material accumulation and political power, this ancient narrative challenges us to question: are we building our lives and our society on what is just and sustainable, or are we following the same tortuous paths of Babylon? Babylon's influence did not stop in antiquity. In Revelation, Babylon also symbolizes the ability to seduce and manipulate the masses, influencing both religious and political practices. Revelation 18:3. Today we see leaders and institutions often more concerned with pragmatism and economic growth than with ethical and moral principles. How can we then, as Christians, use our faith to positively influence governance and promote justice, peace, and the common good? Our leaders, whether they are politicians, business people, or religious figures, face significant challenges and temptations. Often, the decisions they make are not just influenced by economic or political factors, but also by spiritual forces that we cannot ignore. Ephesians 6:12 reminds us that our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the principalities, against the powers, against the world rulers of this darkness, against the spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. This passage underscores the importance of recognizing that leaders are often at the center of an intense spiritual struggle. As Christians, it is crucial not just to judge or criticize our leaders for the challenges they face, but to understand and intercede for them. Knowing that they are under great pressure and often under spiritual attack, we should be empathetic and committed to supporting them with our prayers and spiritual support. The Bible is clear about the need to pray for those in positions of authority. In 1 Timothy 2:1-2, Paul instructs, "First of all, I urge that supplications, prayers, intercessions, and thanksgivings be made for all people, for kings and all who are in high positions, that we may lead a quiet and peaceable life, godly and dignified in every way." This guidance is not just a recommendation for a devotional practice. It is a spiritual strategy to positively influence society and promote peace. Praying for our leaders means not only asking for them to make good choices, but also that they be protected from evil influences and guided by principles of wisdom, justice, and compassion that reflect the heart of God. By doing so, we contribute to an environment where good can thrive and where contemporary challenges can be met with solid moral principles. In this context, prayer emerges not just as an act of devotion, but as an act of intervention. Praying for those in power is not just about asking for generic blessings. It is seeking that they have discernment and strength to resist temptations of corruption and injustice. By interceding for our leaders, we are actively participating in shaping the future. asking that they be guided by values that mirror the justice and mercy of God. Please leave your comment below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more deep reflections. God bless you.